Okay, thanks the organizer for having me here presenting some of the results that we are working on for some time now. So the title is Statics and Dynamics of Two-Dimensional Melting in Disordered Environment. So what we are going to address is written here in short, that an ordered phase is not possible in 2 dimensions, something that we know for a long time, Marmin-Wagner theorem and so on and so forth, and hence thermal melting in 2D is driven by unbinding of topological defects like in vortices in Ghosal transition and so on and so forth. So what we are going to ask is how do such melting and the associated phases modify in the presence of impurities? So that's the question that we'll be focusing on today. Okay, and this work was done by these 2 students at IISc Kolkata, where I'm from, Jami Prashanti, who is now a postdoc at JNCASR, Saikat Datta, who is continuing and who contributed to the second part of the work, and we benefited a lot by active collaboration with senior collaborators, Professor Chandan Das Gupta and Pinaki Chaudhary. So first part of this is written up and under review, and then I'll talk about some unpublished work as well. So to give you a basic idea what it is, so the 2-step melt, I mean in 2D melting is generally described by a 2-step melting process of the topological defect unbinding, and it goes by the name which is long KTHNY, Kostelis, Thaules, Halperin, Nelson, Young, and actually for right reasons people want to add Berezhinsky at the beginning, BKTHNY, etc. And this was developed over a long time by these people over a time. So what it means in simple terms is the following, that you have, so basically when you heat up the system, first at a lower temperature unbinding of dislocation pairs occur. So this is like a dislocation. So dislocation forms when a lattice line suddenly ends in the middle of the crystal. And then these things separates out, they move around, and that's the unbinding of dislocation. That's the first step of melting. And in the second step, unbinding of disclination pairs occur. So each of these dislocation, this red and green here, they make a disclination pair because one of them comes with a 5-coordinated neighborhood versus 7-coordinated neighborhood, whereas in a perfect crystal, they're all 6-coordinated neighborhood, we know. So this is the picture of the melting, broadly speaking, that these 2 kinds of defects will unbound. So as a result, what happens that in 2-dimensional melting, you have between solid and liquid a phase called hexatic, which is sandwiched, which is between the first transition and the second transition. And this is something which has a bond orientation order. I will talk a little bit about it. And the width of these phases depend on the actual model. So one must understand that this is an effective description. KTHNY is like an effective description elasticity theory, effective in the sense of Ginsburg-Landau. So the actual microscopic model, whether it will satisfy or not, depends on the details, and that we are not going to talk too much about it. Now, what I wanted to sort of motivate is that there are experiments, like for example in these colloidal systems, what you find that as you increase pinning, which is like an impurity, the hexatic phase, the interesting exotic phase, hexatic phase, widens in expense of solid. So can one understand the effect of disorder in a systematic way? And then within India, there are very interesting experiments which are in line with that. One is from the group of Pratap Raichaudhuri at TIFR, where one looks into the vortex lattice melting. Then there is another which is very interesting results from our colleague Rajesh Ganpati from JNCASR, who looks into such Cohen's defect mediated melting in a curved surface, 2-dimension but curved surface. Okay, so now what we are going to do is that we will look into the KTHNY melting in what is called a Gaussian core model. Interaction is of this form. Sort of obvious there is a core, and that is Gaussian in nature. And this was, the clean system, the melting was established long back. And we take this model because this is a microscopic model which shows a garden variety KTHNY theory in the following way, that you first look into how the positional order behaves by looking into the height of the first peak of the structure factor that collapses at some temperature. And you also look into what is called a bond orientational order, which is measured by the propensity of having a 6-coordinated neighborhood with each angle being 60 degrees for a triangular lattice. So they also collapse at some point, and then you can look into the generalized susceptibilities, which you can measure from fluctuations, to identify what are the transition point. And you see that this disappears here, the first transition, and the next one is little bit higher temperature. So basically in between you have ecstatic phase. So we will be looking into this model only. However, we now add disorder, and I wanted to emphasize the kind of disorder we work with. So we work with two kinds of disorders. One is called a random pinning, so which is, the name is sort of obvious, that we randomly quench some of the particles anywhere in space, randomly anywhere in space. In other words, you can think that, so here black dots are like the perfect triangular lattice which would occur at 0 temperature. So you can think of having the simulation at very large temperature and suddenly quenching some fraction of particles at random location. And I will contrast result with something else which we call commensurate pinning, which is somewhat similar except for the fact that here I quench the particles, again random fraction, certain fraction randomly, but consistent with the lattice vertices at 0 temperature. So in other words, you can think of this situation as doing the simulation at lowest temperature and freezing some of the particles, random fraction of particles. This is very important to compare these two, because this is nearly uncorrelated disorder, whereas this is highly correlated disorder. I mean, if you wish, this is actually infinitely correlated disorder because of the lattice commensuration. So now if you look into the results, so what happens is that these green lines are exactly like the one that I said. This is the translational order, how it collapses, and this is the bond orientational order. Green is what Prestipino and all calculated, we match with them very well. So what we do in addition is this blue line is the commensurate pinning, that is the correlated disorder, and red is the random disorder. So what we see interestingly, that in case of random pinning, the positional order already is very, very fragile, it's very, very weak compared to the other cases, crystal pinning or clean system here. Green is clean and blue is the crystal pinning or commensurate pinning. So this is very fragile, and if you look into the susceptibility, so green of course shows this transition, I mean some sharp peak here. Blue also shows some sharp peak. However, red is a very, very shallow and wide peak, which is essentially no transition at all, if at all anything like a very broad crossover. So there is, that way there is no forced transition. There is no positional order to begin with in the random pinning. On the other hand, on the other hand, if you look at the bond orientational order, then all these systems, clean and the both type of disorder, they have a quasi long range order in the system as it is, and then they undergo transition. So what is very interesting then, there are two things. One is the red one, which is random pinning, that shows only one transition because there is no ordered state at low temperature. The blue system, it shows transition, however, it shows, is all done or? Okay, so and however, what happens is that both the transition occur at the same point. So that means again you have just one transition. So the upshot is that there is, while the clean system has solid to liquid transition with a hexatic in between, disordered system, irrespective of the type of disorder, you will have just one transition. However, the phases are actually quite different depending on what kind of pinning you have. So because my time is up, I will not talk too much about it. So what we did later is we tried to get some kind of a deeper understanding by looking into dynamics. And what turns out that if you look into the MSD, time-dependent MSD, what you find, there is some interesting dynamical signature even in the clean system. So what it means is that there is a solid-like behavior here, there is a liquid-like behavior here, and then in between there is a hexatic behavior that is well known. However, the lower part, lower temperature of the hexatic phase, we find some subdiffusive behavior. So the thing is, even in the hexatic fluid, there is a two slope behavior that one would expect, that is known, but at long time it should have been linear in the scale, so that is a diffusive behavior which is not found, and we have done that in a very systematic manner. And so this turns out because of some interesting dynamical signature which I have no time to talk about in details, but this is sort of consistent with the results that we found in the static, in the sense that this phase diagram looks pretty good. I mean, remains good even with the signature from dynamics. So I will stop here and I'll be happy to take questions now. Thank you so much for your attention.
We can take only one question. So if you go back to your previous slide, yeah, the next one. Yeah.
This.
So here, what is the top leftmost?
Here,
Yeah,
this is for the clean system.
clean
So
system.
clean system, there is this solid-like behavior, as you can see, and then there is a liquid-like behavior here. In between, you have very interesting dynamical signature where you have subdiffusive behavior,
But,
whereas earlier people
yeah,
talked.
that's what the question is.
Yeah.
If you go for even longer time, what happens?
So that's what we have done. I mean, we have done it for various times and tried to do a fitting and all that, and we found always something which is subdiffusive. It doesn't become one at very long time, to the extent that we could do numerics with.
With bare eye, it doesn't look like it has settled down. Or
So this is 1 over t, and then this is the fitting that we have done, and where it cuts the intercept. So that's the best we could do. Yeah. What is interesting that for the random pinning system, it will always show this kind of a subdiffusive behavior, the whole low temperature phase, and that's the signature that something interesting is happening there. And that can be looked into by looking into the space and looking into the dynamics, that there's some correlated motion, and I can tell you more about that.